On this, we're joined in Melbourne by the Director of Epidemiology at the Doherty Institute, Jodie McVernon. Jodie, lovely to speak to you.
Hi, Patricia.
What do you make of the decision to dump the targets?
I don't think it's as much a decision as a pragmatic reality. I think we expect honesty and transparency from our governments. Australia was in a very fortunate position of having control over its own vaccine supply. We're still in that position. And obviously over the weekend, there's been the decision made that on a risk-benefit basis, given our current situation, that vaccine's only available for over 50s or recommended for over 50s. So we now are open to the vagaries that all of the rest of the world is in terms of being able to access a very desired resource. So our government is out there. It's made additional deals with Pfizer. We have pending arrangements with Novavax. There are other companies, that our regulators are reviewing their products. So we're out there in the market like everybody else, but we can't make promises any more than anybody else can.
Okay, so was it a mistake for the government to make the promise in the first place? Because it did make a promise and now it has completely walked away from that.
Well, but as I say, we were in a different position when we could control the manufacture of a product on shore. I think it was a very different thing than competing in the global markets with Europe and the US and other countries where we know supply issues have also been experienced.
Is there any likelihood that every eligible Australian will get one dose, one shot of this vaccination program by the end of the year?
Look, I think that's clearly an important target. We're talking about reopening, we're talking about moving Australia through to the next phase, and ensuring confidence in vaccines at the moment is absolutely critical. That means that when safety concerns are raised about a vaccine that are incredibly rare, but in an environment like ours, which, can I just remind everyone how extraordinary it is that we don't have circulating COVID at the moment, means that risk is deemed unacceptable in under 50s. So, all of these things are made in the context of Australia's rather unique situation. And other countries around the world are making different risk decisions because of what's happening in their populations. We're seeing countries like Canada talking about rationing ICU beds. We've seen a massive resurgence in India. We're still seeing, huge numbers of cases and deaths in South America. This is all real and it's all happening around us. And it means that other countries are experiencing a very different risk landscape.
Changed, the advice in AstraZeneca has changed, but actually the way we invested in AstraZeneca, isn't that part of the mistake here?
AstraZeneca was the first vaccine that was actually rolled out and licensed. So having access to the first one was not a bad idea. And again, Australia's regulators made the decision that given no COVID here, no risk of disease, that we would take the time to have a formal approvals process rather than emergency use. And that's actually what's given us the time to take on board all of this additional safety advice that's been coming out of Europe and the UK and other countries where it's been well used. So that's part of the we want everything, we want all of it now, but information takes time to come to light. And then in terms of access to deals, well, okay, yeah, we signed deals early, but when the EU decides they have more cases and they're holding on to it, we don't have necessarily the power to be able to force them to give us vaccines when they believe it's more of a priority to distribute them in Europe. So, these things are about markets. They're about forces that are beyond necessarily our government's power to manipulate as part of the wider global picture.
But in terms of that global wider picture, are we forever on the back foot, Jodie? Because there's obviously booster shots which may be provided in the future. If we haven't even had our first or second dose, doesn't that sort of put us behind in a longer term way?
Well, we also haven't had our first dose of real COVID. One of the reasons that many countries are being able to get up to reasonable levels of immunity quite quickly is they've had incredibly high attack rates of COVID and a high rate of death. So one of the unknowns here is, how much natural immunity and vaccine immunity is contributing to what's seen in different countries. We're seeing emergence of variant strains that are more transmissible, particularly across Europe. That's altering the profile, and we're having to rethink, what will be needed in terms of booster vaccines and how well will vaccines work against these strains. It's 2020 all over again. We're learning new things all over again in this situation. In a sense, we have the opportunity to learn from what happens elsewhere rather than being behind, if you want to see it that way around. And in the meantime, we've avoided that burden of suffering that so many other countries have borne, which is the incredible win behind us, and in economic terms, what's actually allowed Australia to thrive much more than many countries over the past year. So I think, we can't accrue all of our wins all at the same time. but we have had substantial gains so far and still, have the opportunity to learn from what's happening elsewhere as we roll our program forward.